think because I have lived in so many places throughout my life across the U.S., that this is even hard for me when someone says, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "What age do you want?" You know, it's a very difficult question for me to answer, honestly, and even for my kids too. We've moved, but what I've always found is the beauty of people who have taken care of us. We have always found community with one another, and it has been in the most surprising of places. Right now, it's our local climbing gym, because we all rock climb together as a family, and it is our, it's our third place. You have these places that it's not home or work, but it's the other place. It's the place where you feel seen and known and loved. And in every place we have lived, you find other people who are journeying in similar ways. You find other people who are also seeking home and connection and kinship and community. And it always happens over meals and over hobbies, things we have in common, or over spirituality, over backgrounds that we're holding, close to our hearts. It happens over family, over kids, and I'm always just so pleasantly surprised at the ways that we truly find home in one another and share that with each other. I write because I need it. I need words and I need writing. It is truly how I process the world. When things are heavy and difficult in the world, I can usually tell those moments when I need to get it out through words, through poetry. I started a blog when my oldest son, Elliot, was born in 2011. And I started that blog. It was called Stories, actually, go figure. And I just wrote stories. I wrote stories on faith and mothering and spirituality and family and home. And I just needed a space to write. I had to write. And then later, in becoming a book writer, obviously it changes, right? There's a lot more discipline required, a lot more trusting of yourself and figuring things out. And what I've realized is that writing is a very transitory, seasonal job, that what worked for me a year ago may not work for me at all this year. What worked for me 2 weeks ago may not be working for me right now. And so it is very much a journey of trusting myself, of trusting what I need and how I can hold that space and process it, because it is a very spiritual act. Yeah, those are great questions. I've been, wanting to write children's books for a while. So when I got the opportunity, I was so excited. And I mentioned I live by the seasons. So I changed the stuff in my home. And, I already have books based on the seasons. So I knew that I wanted to write a box set based on the 4 seasons from a Potawatomi perspective. And so that has been a gift. And what I have realized in writing this is that this series, and even a friend pointed this out to me recently who's also a writer, that I kind of took everything that was in Living Resistance and I made it into a children's series. And I thought that's pretty much what I did. And that same vein of caring for ourselves, each other, and Mother Earth, that's what these children's books are about. But they're for kids to explore and process that in a beautifully subversive way. And for adults too. I've had people email me and say, I bought this for my kids, but I kept it for myself. And that means so much to me, because we all have something to learn in connecting back to our child selves. We all have so much healing to do. And so writing a book on this little girl, Donnie, and her family's relationship to winter and what it means to have a meal and to hold space for hibernation and rest and care. I mean, isn't that a lesson we're all still learning? As adults, we will always be learning these lessons. And so it's extremely subversive in such beautiful ways. And I can't wait to write more children's books. It's been a blast.
Yes, and the second part of that, the subversive potential of children's books.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, I think that, I've read books that have changed me that are children's books, and I can tell that they're speaking such depth to my kids. I mean, you think it's just about this one thing, but it's so much deeper than that. And I think sometimes we catch it as adults, but sometimes the kids catch it way before we do. And I think that it really is an art to try to be able to create that as a children's book author. And one journey I'm really excited to go on and figure out. I think I'll kind of share about this in some of the different circles that I work in, right? So I work with a lot of other writers and some academics, and so I'm in that kind of world of sharing kinship with one another. And then I do interfaith work, and I'm working with other faith leaders, and we're talking about how we can care for one another in the world and change the world through our work there. And though they are different, I also find a lot of overlap truly because we are all human and we're all longing for kinship. And honestly, I think we are asking the same types of questions. We're asking how to show up in this world. We're asking how to care for each other better in this world. And I'm seeing those same questions in both spaces. They just may be answered a little differently, or they may have different language to them. But I think that I've really enjoyed being in these different spaces because I'm seeing so much overlap in myself as well. And again, the liminal space of trying to hold both and really seeing the gifts of kinship showing up in both. Well, it is that. You know, I have, in the time I've been writing on this and leading workshops and being with people, I have continually realized that so much of our healing is through reconnecting to our child selves, healing those parts of our relationship to them, and connecting back to the lands and the earth. And these two things are truly connected, what I have found, and what the people I've spoken to and the work I've done. And that is going to bring up, both of those are going to bring up grief. And it's going to bring up these conflicts within us where we're trying to figure out who we are. You know, like when we leave a space we've known for a long time and we're moving on, there's grief there. There's deep grief there. There's a lot that we have to process when we come to terms with America, right? Like we've known in America, a certain America for a long time, and then all of a sudden we start to uncover things. That's hard. There's a lot of grief in that process. There's a lot of struggling. When we have been living in that room of self-hatred for a long time and suddenly we realize, oh, there's a different way I could be with myself, that's going to take a lot of grief and journeying and joy and perhaps therapy, if that's possible, to work through that. And I would say it's a lifelong journey. So it is not a linear, I'm going to start here and I'll be here in 2 weeks. It is not that. It is cyclical, and it is labyrinthine, and it is lifelong, but it is such a gift we can even give to future generations, and that the constant healing for ourselves and learning to love ourselves will last beyond our lifetime, I believe. That you can do it, and that, you know, I've talked to teachers before who are asking questions of how do I say around Thanksgiving, how do I decolonize the way I'm teaching it? How do we unlearn? And I tell them to start small, like start with one book that sparks a conversation and build off of that. Start with one aspect of something, because the problem that I continually see is that we want to change, we want to unlearn, we want to do these things, but we have sort of given each other a very short timeline. We've given each other this, you've got to get it done right now. And I think that what then happens is there's this pressure and shame that builds very quickly, and then we burn out, or we think, I can't do it, I don't know how to do this. And I don't think that that's fair to the human process. So start where you can. Start with something simple. I said earlier that books change people. They truly change our hearts and our minds. I mean, thinking about contemplation and care and self-love, all of these things are also connected to these difficult conversations of identity and history and unlearning. I never want someone to feel shamed to the point that they just give up trying to begin somewhere. I don't think that that's the point of any of this. And so finding ways to unlearn and begin that journey in small ways that feel accessible, that feel like we can, and being okay with the fact that we're going to make mistakes along the way, that we have people we trust to hold in community as we journey, I think is really important. And it's okay to understand the longevity and sustainability, again, of this work, and that it will matter, and we take our time and we unlearn as we can. And it's like building, building blocks, building steps every time you do that. So let me show you the cover. This is my book, and on the cover, it's beautifully designed by an Indigenous art designer, and there is this circle in the middle, this Venn diagram, and I called it the 4 realms of resistance. So I created this cyclical framework for us to process this, because sometimes it helps to have a little bit of a framework to work with along the way. And so the book is not even meant, you could start at the end and jump to a different framework, a different part of the framework in the book. You don't even have to start at the beginning if you don't want to. If you want to start more in the communal realm, where we're thinking about kinship and solidarity, if you feel that's where your heart is, start there. If you want to start in the personal realm, which is that realm of self-love where the micro is happening, then start there. If you need to begin in that space, which I think a lot of us do. That's why I start the book with it. But if that's where you need to be, go to that realm. There's another realm called the ancestral realm. That's the realm where we're dealing with history. We're dealing with who came before us and who's coming after us and who are we in that space in between. And then the middle realm is the integral realm. So think integration and maybe more of the macro. Like, what are we doing on the big levels? How are we trying to shape the world? I did not want my book or my work to feel too big to try. I want it to feel like we can all learn something about resistance in some realm of our life in my work. I want it to feel accessible. And so helping us understand that this work of resistance can be in our everyday life. It can be in the small moments, but it can also be in the big moments, that it matters, that both matter. I think that that's been a recurring theme in my work, is that all of those realms matter, and they're all important to pay attention to. I believe that the healing that we do today does find its way to our ancestors in some way or another. In the same way that I believe the healing that we're doing today is finding future generations who come after us. I often say that, we are living in this liminal space where we have ancestors, but we are also ancestors in the making, that we are living our life today to become ancestors one day. And so the healing that we're doing has to sort of exist on both ends of everything and everything in between. And so finding ways to heal, and again, truly, no matter who we are, like, it's not just Indigenous people that should be connecting back to the land. Like, everyone connect back to the land. This is who we are as human beings. Our journey of healing and care is tied to the lands around us. It's tied to Mother Earth. It's tied to there's a reason that we need this. There's a reason that we need moments by water. There's a reason that we long for it. In our souls, we're made for this. And so that healing, that relationship and healing our connection to the earth, it sort of reverberates. It has to be bigger than just us in our lifetimes. And I think that going on that journey, we should remember that we're here today doing this work, and we're healing things that maybe they couldn't. And we're doing this work to heal things so that those who come after us don't have to. And it all matters, and it's all connected. I get some form of this a lot, and it's kind of in the vein of like, what kind of Christian are you now? And like, isn't it still pretty great that you can be that? And I will often try to explain to people how utterly complex it is to be an Indigenous woman and to have any connection to Christianity whatsoever, and that Indigenous peoples, not just here, but around the world, have a very complex relationship to Christianity. And I think that having these conversations is so important, because I just don't think that people fully understand and grasp it. And that's one reason why I wrote my book Native, because I was trying to to come to terms with it in my own journey and help others come to terms with at least American Christianity, evangelical Christianity, and what I grew up in and what I knew is that it is this celebration that the savages have been saved. And I am constantly trying to help people understand the problems with the way that we think about it. And that is a deep, unhealing journey that we have to work through as a nation and in the church. I mean, it's incredibly difficult, and there's still a lot of the, for lack of a better word, saviorism of trying to help save Indigenous communities. And it's very complex. While at the same time, I have a lot of relatives who are very much Christian, who are very much embedded in their faith communities. I would never judge them for that because they hold that space and it's important and speaks again to the complexities of all of this. But it is incredibly damaging for us to carry on that narrative in any way. Yeah, I was just reflecting yesterday with some folks about, I was kind of, pouring back through my own life and looking at these moments when I have had such special relationships with people who believe differently than I did. I mean, who held other views of the world, and whether it was culturally or religiously in faith, and it was such a gift to me because I think of at least in our ways of belief and what we hold in the world, we have this bubble around us, and we can expand that bubble, and that's such a gift. And I've been working with the Aspen Institute Religion and Society program for the last few years, and what I found is this challenge of trying to obviously fix the problems that need to be fixed, like right now in our time, but also trying to slow down and pay attention to who we are and how we take care of each other along the way. And it's really difficult because we obviously need to jump to action in so many things, but how do we jump to action if we don't truly know and care for each other? How do we jump to the action part of things when we haven't sat with each other's stories and paid attention to how we got here in the first place? And I think that that's one of the challenges of interfaith work is trying to get to the heart of things and trying to get to the work that we need to do in the world, but also making sure that it is sustainable, that we are doing it in a way that we're actually holding care for one another along the way. And I think that's in many different circles, but even in interfaith spaces, I see that as well. The psychology definition of liminality is like going between boundaries. So it's that, going between these different boundaries. So for me, liminality is the gray area. It's the, we're not this or that, we're not, whatever the binaries are, there's always this muddy space where a lot of people actually are hiding, but they don't know how to say that they're hiding there and they don't know what it means exactly. And I want to be in that spot with people asking lots and lots of questions.
Kaitlin, Curtice, you have ushered us in a wise way to a liminal space. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.